Policymakers in most rich nations are starting to pull back on stimulus measures that help their economies survive the coronavirus pandemic. Japan is an outlier. It's announced a historic package of handouts to individuals and businesses. That's on top of the $770 billion in support the government has spent since the pandemic began. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida hopes the cash injection will boost domestic activity and offset the effects of global supply chain bottlenecks that have hurt the nation's exporters. Paolo Montecillo has more.
Just over a week after winning re-election, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has unwrapped a gift for his constituents. At the center are handouts to households and struggling businesses. Also included are pay hikes for healthcare workers and subsidies for domestic travel.
The scale of this stimulus package is about $490 billion in fiscal spending. The content and scale are sufficient to deliver a sense of relief and hope to Japanese citizens.
The government wants to restart a recovery that stalled in the third quarter. GDP shrank 3% in the 3 months to September as factory output slumped due to supply chain bottlenecks. Japan also missed out on extra income from hosting the Olympics in Tokyo as authorities sought to contain the coronavirus.
Our sales dropped to 10% of the normal value during the height of the pandemic. Even when the business was better, the sales was less than 50%.
But there are doubts the fresh stimulus will amount to more than just a short-term bump. Similar moves in the past have failed to result in lasting improvements. Japan's also held back by an aging population, which, combined with strong labor laws, makes it harder for businesses to adapt to changing conditions.
Corporate managers can't simply raise wages, which are a fixed cost, because they must take care of employees who will join the company until they are 65 or 70 years old.
The government's generosity comes at a time when other rich nations have turned stingy. The US and the UK have already let extra unemployment benefits expire, and central banks are starting to taper cheap cash injections into financial markets to slow inflation. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
For more, let's go to Mickey Levy. He's the chief economist for Asia and the US at Berenberg Capital Markets in New York. Thank you for being with us today. Despite a larger than expected stimulus plan, the response from investors and markets has been pretty much muted. Is the cash injection not expected to boost revenues and profit for the Japanese economy?
Well, the fiscal stimulus in Japan will definitely boost domestic consumption. But this isn't Japan's weak spot. Its weak spot is its export-related manufacturing, not just due to the supply chain bottlenecks, but also due to slower economic activity in China that's affecting the rest of Asia. And this is the biggest issue that Japan faces going forward. But nevertheless, I would expect this stimulus is going to help, and it should help at least over the next year.
Right. A large chunk of the package also entails cash handouts to households. Do you expect this to significantly increase consumer spending in the country? We know that Japanese households may have different propensity to spend and invest than, say, American households. What's your view?
Oh no, you're bringing up a great issue. I think it'll have a modestly positive impact. But keep in mind, when people receive kind of a one-time temporary subsidy from the government, some of it is saved rather than spent. It's not like it's adding to permanent income. So what's going to really lead to stronger, persistent consumer spending will be, getting that manufacturing sector back on track. And that's unfortunately a little out of Japan's hands now. But the fiscal package, I think, is well intentioned, and I think people will view it as positive.
And Mickey, what about the impact of this stimulus package on Japan's debt? I mean, we know Japan is one of the most indebted nations in the world. Is this adding concerns?
No, it adds to debt, but it doesn't really add to concerns because we have to keep in mind that the Bank of Japan effectively monetizes most of it. Bond yield, like 10-year JGBs are close to zero, so the debt servicing costs are exceedingly low, and over 90% of all the debt is held domestically. So it really that isn't a concern, even though it does add debt.
Right, and lastly, what about the timing of this package? I mean, analysts are pointing out to the fact that other, rich economies are actually taking the opposite direction and unwinding on their stimulus packages, and Japan is going in the opposite direction. What's your view on that?
Okay, so there's the timing is not bad for Japan. I mean, industrial production has not gotten back to where it was pre-pandemic. Its economy has lagged, as you pointed out. GDP declined in the third quarter, so they do want to stimulate consumption. But I would make the following point: the U.S., which is instituted massive fiscal stimulus, over $1 trillion of the legislation passed even before the Infrastructure Act has not yet been spent. So it's not as if the U.S. is cutting back. There's still tremendous flows of stimulus into the economy.
Mickey Levy, thank you very much for this analysis.